Well, welcome and good evening. I'm Bjorn Hansen, the Divisional Dean of the Tisch Center. This is our first large Tisch Center gathering of 2014, and it's just a wonderful evening. Thank you for being here. We have almost 300 students, 22 alumni, our full-time faculty, many of our adjunct faculty, friends of the Tisch Center, many invited guests, and it's a very special night tonight because we also have here Bunny Grossinger. Bunny. Bunny is really the founder of the Tisch Center more than anyone else. If you get to know Bunny, you'll understand what I'm saying. She basically badgered NYU into establishing the Tisch Center. She also introduced the Tisch Center proposal to Jonathan Tisch, which is why we became the Tisch Center. So there really is no one with more of an influence in the history of the Tisch Center than Bunny. She's been involved in fundraising, finding internships for students, finding jobs for students who've graduated in the past and our current graduates. She's been a participant in our capstone courses. She's been a mentor to our students. She's recruited high school students to join our program. She served on our advisory board, our executive committee, and she established this lecture series. So again, no one has been more important in the history of the Tisch Center than Bunny Grossinger. So please join me again in thanking her. Bunny. This semester is off to a great start in almost every way. Our numbers and everything that can be measured, whether it's enrollment, diversity, scholarship dollars or number of scholarships awarded, the number of internships, the places where we have internships, our placement of our graduates, mid-year graduates, almost every single measure is at the most favorable in the history of the Tisch Center. And we've had just an extraordinary start for this semester with our connections with industry, not only with guest lectures and our adjuncts, but our Tisch Center moments and special lectures. Let me just go through what's happening this semester with our Tisch Center moments. We had on January 29th, the National Football League Players Leadership Team. On February 27th, sponsored by the Hospitality Business Society, and really coordinated through Professor Yuka Latamaki, our Cuba panel and many presentations about Cuba during classes over 2 days. Tomorrow, March 7th, we have the COO of the Halekulani Corporation. Halekulani was the first major hotel in the world to eliminate a front desk, and it did it in 1982. Before the technology really supported that. So again, one of the great luxury brands of lodging. On Wednesday, March 12th, the Hotel and Tourism Society will be hosting an event about the luxury hotel and travel market. On Thursday, March 29th, the Senior Vice President for the National Football League will be doing a presentation on what made New York, New Jersey the most successful Super Bowl in the history of the games. On Tuesday, April 1st, we'll have a documentary showing of the last song before the war, a festival in the desert in Mali, and that was produced by a Tisch Center alumna, Andrea Pepito. On Monday, April 7th, we'll have a social media expert and best-selling author talking about social media and implications for our sectors. And on Thursday, March 1st, a spotlight on marketing of destinations talking about Turkey. And then June 1 through 3, 1st through 3rd, is our annual New York University International Hospitality Industry Investment Conference, where we will welcome 2,000 senior executives from around the world to spend 3 days discussing hotel development and finance. So boy, do we strive to try to have the greatest connections we can with industry. We hope you're enjoying the contacts that you make and the experiences that happen even outside of the classroom. I have a favor to ask. During the month of March, all undergraduates will receive a request to complete a survey. It's called the NYU Undergraduate Experience Survey. There are two special reasons why I would ask you to participate in the survey. One is, if the results would be similar to the survey of the last version of it, it did as much as could be done in any initiative we can think of to add and enhance to the prestige and stature of the Tisch Center across NYU. We received on some measures the highest scores in all of NYU, and many of the highest scores. And it was interesting to sit in the debriefing meetings and have the provost and the president and other deans, including the dean of that other Tisch that didn't fare so well, say, what is this Tisch Center thing with all of these great scores? So it was a great opportunity, again, for us to get to be better known. Now, we're not anticipating anything about scores this time, but it is very helpful to have as many students as possible to participate, because we also had the highest participation rate of any program across all of NYU. But even more important than the scores were the comments. And the comments really helped us plan changes for what we do in the Tisch Center. Two of them I'll select just as examples. We really heard loud and clear that although our collaborative model and advisement was really appreciated by our students, the personnel changes that needed to be made really were important. So you may have noticed over the last year, many personnel changes, many new academic advisors that were hired and added to our complement of advisors. And we changed our model so that you will have your academic and faculty advisor for 3 years. Your freshman year, you're advised by kind of an onboarding advisor, but thereafter, you will have the same advisors, faculty, and academic for all 3 years. That's something that came out of the comments from that survey. We also changed elements of the internship program under the leadership of Professor Wayne McDonnell, and including such things as reducing the number of postings that are involved in the internship courses. Many, many other things. So again, we love the scores and we welcome the comments. So thank you. We're here for you and those kinds of issues of feedback. You'll be getting an email from me also asking that you two please do participate, and if there's anything you'd like to talk about that you don't want to put in a survey, please email or call me, and I'll be happy to take any feedback you have at any time. I'd like to think I'm among the most accessible of deans in all of NYU and would really welcome any comments from any students anytime. Well, I've really been looking forward to tonight's program for many, many weeks. Professor Sharr, Prohaska, Dr. Lynn Minnaert created an extraordinary program tonight. We have 5 renowned experts on sustainability and related fields. Their biographies are in the program, so I won't go through those, but our format is to have each of the 5 do a short presentation, about 12 minutes in length, and then if all of our presenters remain on schedule, we should have brief time for some questions. So please join me in thanking Professor Sharr, Prohaska, Dr. Lynn Minnaert for preparing and organizing tonight's program, and let's start the show.
Hello, thank you for coming everyone, and welcome also on behalf of Professor Prohaska and myself to this special session on tourism and sustainability. It's a topic that's very close to both our hearts, and that has been a topic of discussion in tourism for many years now. It's the same in hospitality, in sports. Sustainability has really taken center stage. In good academic tradition, where academics can never agree on anything, there are many, many definitions of what sustainable tourism is. The UNWTO, for example, calls it a tourism that takes full account of its current and future economic, social, and environmental impacts, so the triple bottom line, addressing the needs of visitors, the industry, the environment, and host communities. So that is quite an ambitious goal to be striving for, and the exciting panelists that we have tonight know all about it. As Dean Hansen already highlighted, their full bios are in your handout, and you will see that they represent the academic sector, the private sector, and the voluntary sector. So I think you'll get a great overview from different perspectives on this very topical theme. Without much further ado, because we are under strict time constraints, I'm going to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Pegi Vail. She's an anthropologist and a filmmaker, and also the Associate Director of the Center for Media, Culture and History here at NYU. She recently shot a great documentary about tourism in the developing world, which she'll talk about, called Green Go Trails, and she's also a judge on WTTC's Tourism for Tomorrow Awards. I'm very excited she's here, so please help me welcome Dr. Pegi Vail.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice, actually, to be at in another school, another departments, different ways of looking at travel, because I come from the anthropology department, and oftentimes we don't necessarily always visit each other's schools and see what everybody's about in other departments and other disciplines. So I'm very happy to be here. I want to greet you as fellow travelers, because I'm assuming that if you're teaching or studying about tourism, that most of you are probably avid travelers yourselves. Hands raised, avid travelers? That's so I'd like to open the conversation today and think about, maybe this is the kind of cautionary side of the beginning of the evening, but to talk about tourism impact and open that conversation on it in general, both the positive and the negative impact, through what I call tourism globalization. And it's basically looking at the process over time and what it means for the future of sustainability in tourism development overall. So this will be more of a visual tour. I'm calling it Travels in Tourism. And if you will, in places that around the world that were featured in our documentary that was just mentioned, Gringo Trails, which really looks at more the unanticipated impact of tourism, tracing some stories over a 35-year period. These past 3 decades were indeed an important time in tourism growth, as many of you know. It's more than doubled or more during that time. So in some ways, we're at a tipping point. And this is the reason why I hope the film and the clips that you'll see tonight, because I'll be showing you some excerpts tonight. The film itself is actually 80 minutes long, so I encourage you to see it when it shows in town again. But I hope it provides a visual tool with, that would be both the cautionary tale as mentioned to illustrate what has and can happen in some places without proper management, while offering sustainable alternatives and some solutions that communities and countries are actively engaging with. All the while hoping that you can enjoy the travel experience itself in some of the clips that I'll show you. But back in, I'm just going to change this slide. Back in 1979, when one of our traveler stories begins, it's actually a traveler at the time. He was a backpacker named Kostas Christ, and he is now the editor-at-large at National Geographic Traveler and also the chairman for the Tourism for Tomorrow Awards. But at one point, long ago, when he was a young man, he was a backpacker, so it starts with his story. But at that time period, 1979, we didn't really have the hindsight as to some of the dramatic changes that most people also didn't know what to expect at that point, what might happen, and with these growing, the tourism influx, how their communities might cope, because people weren't thinking ahead at that time. And we didn't have the hindsight to look to see what's happened in other places prior to that. So I hope this will, both for the young travelers out there that are maybe about to set out, I hope it makes you encourage actually responsible travel and studying responsible travel even more than I'm sure that you're very much engaged in that. That's what this is all about here. And for those of the seasoned or older travelers, we're hoping it provides a means to reflect on some previous journeys, and maybe we could all think about ways we can give back, maybe to some of the places we've been to. But I'm getting interested in how we can give back, maybe if we've already been to many places and would like to think further about that. So I want to preface the clips by saying I'm going to show you a series of 3 clips from the film, by initially saying that I was interested in looking at the backpacker, more like a backpacker ethnography when I first started shooting the film, which was in 1999, way back in 99. And by that time, backpackers had kind of come of age, in the 80s and 90s especially. So I had wanted to explore it through an ethnographic lens, though. I had been a long-time traveler myself, a backpacker at first. I travel a little differently now. But so I wanted to kind of look at the backpacker subculture as because backpackers are actually, even though sometimes they had been dismissed, they actually, open the doors to the industry in a lot of places, particularly low-income countries. And so I wanted to look at that process in tourism globalization, from the doors opening to kind of what happens as mid-budget, upper-budget travel levels start to happen, but looking at their role in kind of opening the doors and then following the whole process. I kind of liken it to gentrification in the urban environments. So backpackers are kind of like what artists are to the gentrification to urban context. And it kind of reminds us, because even though both these groups, whether it's the artist freelancer or the backpacker, even if they're traveling on a shoestring, they tend to also be coming from middle class and upper middle class backgrounds. So it's kind of a reminder to think about how much for all of us in this room that travel is really a privilege for all of us to enjoy. and that it is a privilege. So just to backtrack a little bit, the social sciences in the 1990s were kind of just starting to get into, since I come from anthropology. When I said I wanted to study, tourism, at first it was kind of like, oh, you want to travel, like, oh, that's a good thing to think, to decide to study, because you get to travel too. But because it was considered a leisure activity, in some ways it was one of the factors, that maybe brought into slow recognition that it's a top industry in the world. Like if you were going to say, oh, I'm going to study the oil industry, it's it's important to look economically at this industry, and to look at the culture of it. So that's what I started to do, way back in '99 when I first started filming, and then when I was also starting my dissertation research. And it's not that there were many people already studying in the social sciences. It was just starting to really gain a lot of ground in the 90s. So you had like Dean McCannell with the tours, like early on, or Eric Cohen's work in Thailand and elsewhere. So what can social sciences, for instance, what would my perspective hopefully add to this look at sustainability and on tourism in general? And I think part of it's long-term participant observation. That's what we do as anthropologists. And that's what we also hope to show in the film, was this long-term look. So I incorporated, you'll see in the footage, the VHS footage. By the way, it was shot at HD, and some of the older footage you're going to see was VHS that was transferred. And these are low-resolution clips so that they could work in the Keynote program. So just know that these are more low-resolution than the final film. I incorporated some 1989 to 1990 footage for this VHS footage from an anthropologist called Klaus Westerhausen, who was looking at the islands, culture on the islands and the changes there. And so, by the time I started, we started filming at that time, but then by the time I went back to it, we returned to this location in 2010, the same location. But I realized at that point that it had gone way beyond thinking about traveler ethnography and really was more about the long-term impact, and because of all the changes that I saw. So I thought that was the more important story to tell and more of a wake-up call that maybe we could look at. And maybe that's encouragement for those that take a long time to get your PhD or master's, that sometimes it works out better if you wait a while, because the film took so long to make. But I think actually the points are better made now than had I finished in the 99 to 2002 when the initial shoots happened. So I'm going to start with these 3 short clips, and the first starting in this location in Koh Phangan, at Hadron Beach, starting in 1979. But I'm just going to show you a little bit of it, and then we'll skip ahead to the present. How many people have been to Koh Phangan? All right. You'll tell me if you went to the full moon party afterwards?
And it was the most spectacular beach that I had ever seen. Just dramatically beautiful, and I was stunned.
And there was a Thai fisherman sitting on this beach, and he was cleaning the barnacles off of his little dugout. And suddenly he looked up and he looked at me, and he looked really startled, and he said in this perfect time warp 1960s English,
"Whoa, man, where did you come from, dude?" His name was Samboon, and Samboon and his wife, Chom, had worked for the US military during the Vietnam War, so they hadn't spoken English since then.
And they had 2 little children who lived on this incredible beach called Hat Rin. And they opened their doors, and I stayed with them for a month, and it was paradise.
Not only was I the only traveler there, but no travelers were going there, period. They weren't there yet. There had been a German couple who I had met in northern Thailand months before, and we had talked about rendezvousing in Koh Samui. And I told them about this beach, this incredible beach, unspoiled, that nobody knew about, and that, I would take them there. But I asked, whatever you do, don't tell people about this place, because what will happen is backpackers will end up going there.
I was a backpacker. I didn't have very much money, and I was looking for some adventure, and I was, looking for something. I met a young man who was like, I just spent 3 months in Hadrin, and there's these amazing people there, this little community. It was a traveler's scene. That's where the backpackers were. I got a bungalow at Bobo's Bungalows. It was about 15 baht, which is about 50 cents. And very quickly realized there was this little community of a couple hundred people with no locks or doors on the bungalows and living very simply and very cheaply. You're with 100 or 150 people from all around the world. You maybe can't speak the same language, and yet we all knew each other. We were one. And wow, I was in paradise. And I knew it, and I knew we all knew it,
Okay, I went way over time already. I was just also, I'm going to have to actually skip way ahead, but we follow the same story. I just want to show you the cautionary tale side here of what happened in 2010. So this is now, it's become an incredibly popular place with full moon parties. Now they have half moon parties. There are no more moons to cover as a party, but this is the aftermath of a full moon New Year's party 2010. Okay, so I'm going to skip some of the clips that you see. I'm just going to skip ahead. But we also followed the same, another traveler's stories from 1981 to the present, Yossi Ginsberg, who had gotten lost in the jungle, ran the Bolivian Amazon. And in the same way, the concept of paradise becomes a marketing tool as well, and it has a great grasp on our imagination, so too does jungle. And he had gotten lost in the jungle. Some people from the San Jose de Uchupiamones community helped save him. But by the time he returned, it had already become this big destination. He wrote a book about it, and then it became this huge traveler's destination. So they're facing some of the same problems there with tourism growth, and they still have some loopholes, some ways around the possibilities that they can change things based on maybe if they could look at other places and see what's happened elsewhere. So he did return, travel responsibility. He returned to help to thank people, and they ended up having a vision of their own to create their own tourism on their own terms, to control it the way they wanted in this indigenous community. It's a kind of Quechua community, because they saw what was happening in this area. And so Yossi Ginsberg, this traveler that had been lost, he ended up helping them find funding. And so I just want to show you the very last words to not come from me, but to come from the chief of this village, that why tourism is important for them, and that if actually it's a great thing if you control it.
The entire area turned to be a national park, the Madidi National Park.
El turismo, cuando uno puede controlarlo, es una industria muy buena, ¿no? Pero si ya sale del control de uno mismo, es algo que ahí se ven las diferencias. En cuanto a los beneficios, como le comentaba al inicio, digamos, de lo que nos genera el turismo, es el mayor esfuerzo para tener, digamos, gente mayormente mucho más entrenada para el futuro.
Hopefully this will help in thinking to the future of sustainability. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor for me to introduce our next speaker, which is James MacGregor, who's president of Ecoplannet. He lives in Morocco, but he's here to share with you over 25 years of experience working in ecotourism, heritage tourism, working in sustainable tourism. And James, will you please come on up? He's received numerous awards. He's worked with lots of organizations, worked in over 40 states. And so tonight what he'll be doing is he's going to be sharing with us, looking back at how this has all evolved, the sustainable tourism field, and where we are right now, and then sort of some thoughts on where we might be in the future. James.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, NYU, and of course, Mrs. Grossinger, who we have the pleasure of being here tonight. I mean, this is a wonderful experience for me to be able to come here and talk about some of my experiences in the past 25 years, but at the same time, identify some of my concerns. So if I could find, yes, here we go. Because as the previous speaker showed, it's not all as rosy as we think, we'd like to think it is with respect to the tourism industry. We've been at this business for a long time, and we've been at the business of sustainability for a long time, but we certainly haven't come to terms with a lot of the major issues. And so that is one of the messages I want to get out, particularly to the students. I mean, I'm in my sunset years with respect to sustainability, so I'm not that sustainable, I guess, any longer. But on the other hand, there is an opportunity to take what has been learned over these past 20 years. And just to be clear, we have been doing this, this idea of sustainability and sustainable tourism for a long time. On the other hand, we still have greater problems than ever with respect to the industry. So, in terms of what I'd like to pass on this evening is the notion that for some of us, we've come to the end, but for you students out there, and this really is a message to the 300 or so students, I mean, this is quite a remarkable opportunity for me, to come to terms with the fact that we're passing the torch on to you. The industry as it is right now is largely missing what has to be done to attain sustainability. I'm just going to briefly go through some of the issues that we have to deal with, and I know others will talk about, but let's just take water, for instance. We keep talking about our carbon footprint. This industry has a remarkable water footprint as well. Not just a carbon footprint, a water footprint. I've made a quick calculation, and I mean quick, and come up with something like 1.3 trillion gallons of water a year that are used by this industry. That's enough to fill most of the buildings in southern Manhattan. It's a huge quantity of water. We recycle about 1% of it, and we actually only treat worldwide about 15 to 20% of it. The rest of it goes into the rivers, goes into the oceans, and we all know the impacts about that. So, I mean, just there's a number of issues out there on the screen, and those are just some of the ones that we have to deal with. I don't have a definition of sustainability. I've been working a long time. I prefer not to have a definition of sustainability, and I prefer not to try to transfer one to you at this point. I'd like instead, as students, as you're finishing off your years, as both graduates and undergraduates, you start to think of your own definition. But what I do know is it has something to do with this first quote. It's from a very interesting book. I don't know if any of you've read it, by Egnathaswaran, a gentleman, an Indian gentleman who runs the Blue Mountain Center out in California, who wrote a book about 25 years ago called The Compassionate Universe. And what he does in that book is reflect on his experience as a young boy growing up in a village in India. And he used to remember how when the villagers got together to make the major decisions about running a village, they never thought about themselves. They always thought about the future. They always considered what the decisions they were going to make had to do with the future of the villages. So that's the basic essence of what we try to deal with when we're talking about sustainability. We want to leave an industry and its resources to the next generations and the generations after that so they can enjoy much of the same pleasures that we've had as travelers and as members of the travel industry. So the challenge becomes quite significant, particularly when you look at the amount of time that we've been at it, and I'm giving a 25-year, 23-year time frame here, for sure indicating that there's a lot of good things being done, but we're still off the mark. We're still not acting sustainably. I do, 20, 30 reports every 2 or 3 years, and I'm now beginning every single one of them with a very nasty phrase, and that is the country, whatever country I'm working in, whatever state, whatever locality I'm working in, by saying that the resources of this country X are diminishing on a daily basis. And the tourism industry is one of the reasons these resources are diminishing. We're using water, we're creating carbon, having a terrible impact on biodiversity in many cases. So as an industry, we have to come to terms with the future that doesn't look that positive. Here's a basic timeline that I put together just to try to conceptualize what's happened in the past 20, 25 years. We started in 1990, or I started in 1990 to be more specific, and there wasn't that much activity, I don't think, before 1990. There was certainly some projects going on. In 1990, I did the Sustainable Tourism Policy and Action Plan for the Canadian government. And basically, the 90s were looking at policy levels, the broad brush approach to sustainability. Didn't necessarily go very far, although there are perhaps 30, 40 countries out there with policies. I can't say from my experience that I've seen a lot of positive response to those policies. The 90s were also a year of doing master plans. And so some of those master plans started to get a little more specific about what needed to be done. And then in the years 20 to 2010, getting close to where we are now, we started to drill down our sustainability approach and start to really work with industry beyond what government could do. Start to work in terms of developing certification programs, grading programs, etc., that took a much more serious look at sustainability from the operator side. And now moving into the last couple of years, I've seen some very interesting transitions. Not enough. I don't want to give you the impression that we're really jumping forward. We're still not doing enough. But what we are doing now is at two levels, which I'm really quite interested in. One of them is providing sustainability certification to the employees, the managers and staff, as well as integrating sustainability into the global certification programs. And then I'm going to make the point that the next phase has to move beyond that. The next phase is really getting the educational institutions alive and ready to provide the training that's necessary for each one of you and all of the other students sitting in all of the other auditoriums around the world, taking tourism management, etc., and bringing it forward to create a more sustainable tourism industry. Okay, I'm going to just run, and unfortunately a lot of these are projects I've been involved in, but they're the ones I can most specifically refer to. 1990, exactly 24 years ago, March 1990, we developed the Sustainable Tourism Action Plan for Canada. And I have to tell you, that was done by 6 people, 8 bottles of wine, over 6 hours. That's the absolute truth. It had to be done. We tried to turn it out. It's got did at the time, in any case, widespread distribution. The point is that a lot of this is not rocket science. If 6 people can get together in a boardroom from 6 o'clock to midnight, drink a little wine, and come up with a set of principles, policies, etc., that can start at least moving the industry in the right direction, it says a lot can still be done. That was followed in 94 when I did the Bahamas Sustainable Tourism Policies. But then again, I start to look at how much we accomplished with those policies. Yes, out of the Bahamas, they have a sustainable tourism unit. There's a separate unit within the ministry that deals specifically with sustainability. But I think it's the only one. Perhaps you know there's other governments that have a sustainable tourism unit. I don't. Again, keeping in the 90s, we had the Palau Sustainable Tourism Policy that was done in 96. I did the first, in Canada in any case, the first Sustainable Tourism Master Plan for a region. Clayoquot Sound was an area that was being threatened by the forest industry. The government decided to bring all of the players together, look at sustainability in a serious way, and see if they could not resolve a lot of the conflicts between First Nations, what you call Native Americans, the forest industry, and the tourism industry. And within that context, we were able to develop a Sustainable Tourism Master Plan. We've also had a number of sustainable tourism workshops that have been provided around the world. And again, each one of them contributing in some way to the notion of sustainability, but not necessarily enough. We're talking maybe a few thousand people getting introduced to some of these concepts. So it has to be elevated to a much higher level with many more people involved in developing this notion of sustainability. We also had in the 90s, I wouldn't say a shift because we really hadn't instilled sustainability into our tourism. What it did do was take the form of ecotourism master plans, ecotourism development plans, etc. Very nature-based. Very good, very important, but not necessarily dealing with all of the issues of sustainability. We also had, in the year 2010, a number of programs developed that were very specific to the operations in terms of grading programs and grading in terms of certification programs. And now moving into the third phase, which I think really started, certainly some of these phases overlap a little, so don't be too specific with trying to identify each one of them. But now we've moved into a phase where, as I've mentioned, we have employee sustainability program. I've just finished doing a 2-year program in the Bahamas where we've actually developed sustainable tourism criteria for guides and for tour operators. Very, very positive in terms of the receptivity by the audience, by the guides themselves. And then the second level, which I think is probably the most positive direction we've taken so far, and that's the development of bringing together 3 concepts. Quality assurance, which we've been doing for years in terms of our STAR grading program. This goes back many years to the original Automobile Association grading program. Bringing into those grading programs what we're calling responsible tourism or sustainable tourism. And the third level of activity within these new grading programs is universal accessibility, recognizing that we have a growing component of our population that needs better access to the facilities because of their physical, visual, auditory disabilities. So now we have systems in place, at least 3 of them that I'm familiar with, that I've worked on, that look at not just sustainability, but sustainability in terms of a much broader context. And you can find any of these, reference to any of these projects on my LinkedIn site. But in 2009, we did the 2008 in Morocco, we pulled together quality assurance standards with sustainability standards. Not yet, I wasn't there yet. Not yet ready to include universal accessibility, but at least sustainability and quality assurance. And then the year after that, I was hired by the Regional Tourism Organization of Southern Africa, looking at 14 countries, looking at the grading program for 14 countries, bringing all of those together under one umbrella, one harmonized system in which we integrated sustainability into the grading programs. And finally, the most recent one that I've been involved with is Lesotho, small little country in southern Africa. Most of you perhaps have not even heard of it. But they have decided as a nation that they wanted, as sort of small as their industry is, that they in fact wanted to start acting sustainably. So with funding from the World Bank, we were able to put together a grading program last year that does include sustainable tourism practices along with quality assurance and universal accessibility. The interesting thing about this, to show just how far we've come as well, with Lesotho, we also have what are called minimum requirements. Remember, those words are very important. They're typically the essence of what an operator needs to get a business license. So by bringing, and we brought 7 or 8 sustainability concepts, sustainability standards into these minimum requirements, saying that if you don't operate, if you don't cooperate, you can't operate your business. So the next level then, as I've said, is moving forward with educational programs, really turning it over to all of you to take these notions of sustainability, bring them forward, take the good work that's been done in the past, and start to really develop the sustainability that we need to protect the industry, and not just as a training exercise. This is perhaps a more difficult concept to get across, but developing a culture of sustainability where each one of your daily activities reflects the issues, the strong issues that are facing the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. For the students who studied tourism policy with me, that was a rather interesting insight, how time pressure and alcoholic beverages impacts on tourism policy, something I was not aware of. Moving on to our third speaker then, I'm delighted that we have with us Dr. Louise Twining-Ward, who is the president at Sustainable Tourism International. I heard about her work many years before I've actually now been lucky enough to meet her. She's worked in a range of countries, over 30 countries, on a wide range of tourism projects, and she helps businesses, governments, and destinations to adopt more sustainable business practices. And she's got a special interest in developing indicators to actually measure and monitor how well these countries are doing. So please welcome Dr. Louise Twining-Ward.
Thank you so much. I'm so very pleased to be here. I actually was an adjunct many years ago on a finance course. It's really nice to see all your faces again. Another reason I'm really glad to be here is I'm a tourism fanatic. I love it, and I know Lynn kind of caught me out with a show of hands things, but I see some hands as to who also really likes tourism out here. Okay, that's great. I'm speaking to the converted. Okay, that's a really good start. So travel and tourism is really up there in Maslow's triangle. It's about self-actualization, about relaxing, about learning, about exploring. But it's even better, those of you who have experienced it, when it's also about enriching lives and changing other people's lives as well as your own. But here's the interesting juxtaposition that I think that the things that James said will make you want to think about. There's a huge problem, you know. We've got this fantastic industry. It's really good fun. We all like dancing on the beach at full moon and throwing our beer bottle in the water. But at the same time, you know, we've got this massive consumption issue. So it's one of the largest global threats. You know, poorly managed tourism. We saw the images of that beach in Thailand. Leads to, obviously, too much trash, dirty water, cultural alienation. And, you know, it's a huge growing industry. And that's fantastic for you because you're going into one of the most important industries in the world. And it's going to keep growing. You've hopefully all seen this graph, over 4% a year, 1.8 billion tourists to cross international borders by 2030, according to the UNWTO. And as James already told you, it's already responsible for 5% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. So, in a business as usual scenario, I'm all about the numbers, so let's think about what does it really mean? If we look into the future, we don't just think about ourselves, but as James says, we think about our grandchildren and what situation they're going to be in, because I probably won't be around by 2050 either. 131% increase in greenhouse gas emissions by then, 154% increase in energy use, 251% increase in the waste generated. So just a lot more of the same. And that's what I want you to think about. I think that's the real fascination of tourism. It's, you know, one of the largest global threats to the environment, but at the same time, you know, it can be a fantastic force for good in the world. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that too, because I think there is a good side to this story, and it's important in all this doom and gloom about the end of the world that we don't forget that there's a good side, there's a business side, there's a side that changes lives. So let's think a little bit about that too. I want to go back to the idea of the business case. So let's have another quick poll of the audience, and you're all a bit shy with your hands, so this time you're going to kind of raise them a bit higher. Two choices. You're looking at TripAdvisor. They've both got the same rating. Okay, one is a super environmentally friendly hotel, same price, same destination. Okay, looks slightly different. And the other one is, you know, not obviously so green. Hands up, who wants the greener one of the two? Excellent. So why is that? It just looks nicer. You're beginning to associate it with quality. But, you know, there's something else. You're Generation Y, of course. You know, you're tech savvy, you're on TripAdvisor, you've got your phones out, you're probably all tweeting right now, and you're unconventional. And you love authenticity, and that's what you're going to get in a green hotel. So forget about, you know, am I going to be eco, am I going to be green, and am I going to eat granola? But just think about, you know, what's going to be better. I'm going to have a better time at that hotel. It's actually better for me as a consumer, and that means if I'm in business, it's a better product to be offering. You want to sell something people actually want to do. And you're not the only ones. You know, a recent TripAdvisor survey found that almost a third of travelers would choose, here it looked like kind of 80%, but about a third in the general public would choose a destination because it's considered eco-friendly. But I was told to not tell you about saving the world or anything like that. I was told to talk about business. So I want to make the case that it's not about eco-lodges. That was so 90s, right? That was when James here was drinking wine in Canada. That was when we were doing certification with one eco-lodge at a time. We've got to go to scale. This has got to get way bigger. And it's happening. You know, some of the biggest companies in the world, the companies that are moving billions of travelers, this company has 350 hotels, it has 14 airlines, and it's talking sustainability because it knows it makes business sense. And if it doesn't make business sense, they wouldn't be doing it. So there's your business case. Royal Caribbean, one of the biggest cruise lines in the world, is doing a lot for sustainability. United Airlines, Eco Skies program, why are they doing it? It's just not an optional extra. It's a risk management strategy. You would much better to be a leader than a laggard. Who wants to be the last one to have a carbon offset program on their airline, or the last one to have a certification? You just don't want to be there with the Nikes and the Pumas. So how are we going to take this to scale? And how are we going to take it up a notch? Because I think the era that we are in now is going way beyond. We moved off the 90s with the eco-lodges, right? And from 2000, 2010, what was it, certification and standards? Okay, so we've got to get bigger. We've got to go destination-wide. We've got to go regional-wide. It's about destinations. How do you do that? It's so much more complicated. You know, you think a hotel is difficult. You've got, you know where your food and beverage is, you know where your back of house is, you got your rooms, you got your water, in-out kind of system. Destination is so much more complicated, and I would encourage all of you hospitality students to immediately switch to tourism, because it's so much more interesting. So, and if you want to switch to tourism, come talk to me afterwards. I'll convince you. So how do we remove the barriers? Because it's so difficult. It's so difficult for a destination manager sitting in the Bahamas, although that manager's obviously had a lot of help from James. But there's a lot of destination managers out there in Oregon, in Vermont, that don't have so much knowledge, that don't have the tools, and maybe they don't have the money. So what do we do? As your students, and you know, I thought I'd go for a literacy model, so I'm thinking about A, B, C, D, and you can apply this to your life, or your boyfriend, girlfriend problems, or you can apply it to tourism. I think it kind of works either way. So what do you do first? You acknowledge there's a problem in your relationship. You acknowledge there's a problem in your destination. You have to know that the reef is threatened in order to do something about it. You have to know that we have a problem with our tourism industry, that there's high unemployment, that there's a real issue with child prostitution, that we have a polar vortex. What is the problem? Then you've got to believe you can do something about it. There's no point in wringing our hands and saying the world's going to end, there's going to be nothing left. There's no point also in turning a blind eye and say, I can't do anything about it. So you've got to believe, and that means the problem has to be something you think you can fix or be part of the solution. So you've got to believe you can do something, and then you've got to have the tools to do it. At Sustainable Travel International, we work a lot with the creation of tools to help businesses and destinations do something about it, and then demonstrating results. And this is the business case for sustainability, and that's where certification came in. You know, what's the incentive? Why should a business go green? What do they get? Now they're getting investor confidence as well with all these new investor ratings, which I'm sure Eric will tell you about later. But it's about demonstrating results so that there's you can really show whether it's marketing advantage or value of your company, that there's an advantage to going green. So that's your ABCD. What are we doing at Sustainable Travel International? As I mentioned, we're working with both businesses and destinations to build partnerships, to share knowledge, design tools a lot. That's the bit that I find is most interesting, that inspire positive change, and that's the results. I'm going to give you some examples because I know that's just kind of a lot of words. But it's really about helping communities and businesses and travelers about how to do tourism more sustainable, how to make it beneficial, because it can be this massive, peaceful force for good. It can be this massive employer and this source of cultural revival, but it can also be devastating. So I thought we'd start close to home. There's an example from Vail. So what's the problem? The problem is they need to show their leaders. They have a Alpine Ski Championship coming up in 2015, and they want to show that they're really doing it sustainably. So what have they done? We've worked with them to set up a green certification program, which is run by this company. It's an NGO, Actively Green, and they set themselves a goal to have 100 companies into that program by the end of the year. So they're managing that system themselves. So our job was to create the tool, to empower them to use it, inspire positive change, and help with the training. It's a train the trainer model, which is, I guess, what we're doing tonight. So a revenue generating system. So you can have certification and sustainability systems that actually generate revenue and generate jobs as well. Example, a little further away, Cozumel. Many of you may have been there, Riviera Maya, Mexico. So it's one of the, oh, that was a little too fast. It's one of the most populous destinations in Mexico, 3 million visitors a year. There's 2 million cruise ship visitors. Small island. So there's, potentially a problem. In 2008, they made a real commitment to sustainability. Last year, they came to us and said, can you check how we're doing? What are the current risks? What's happening? And there are still a lot of red lights. Yeah, they've done a lot of things, but there's still a marine environment that is under threat and some significant water issues. So we got the community together and developed 3 action projects directed at some of the risk areas, which are now going to be funded by a donor agency. Lanzarote, I'm going to show you a video. That's why there's a black picture in there. I'm sure the technicians are going to do something marvelous any second, but not yet, just hold on. So Lanzarote is a chunk of the Sahara that's fallen off. It's 100 miles west of Africa. It's basically an island that shouldn't really even be there. So no surface water at all. And how do you do 2 million tourists on a volcanic wasteland and do it sustainably? And so they had to cap the number of, they were an early mass tourism destination, they were an early destination that committed to sustainability. They've had to live and breathe sustainability. They didn't even really know they were doing it because it just had to be part of life when you're living in that kind of an environment. So they are extremely resourceful people. They're drinking seawater and they're doing all this cool stuff that they didn't even know was cool. So they want to talk about it now because they can't grow their tourism industry anymore. So what can they do? Here's the great thing about sustainability. It brings value. If you can talk about it in the right way, how can you present it in a way that attracts higher spending tourists, not maybe the cheaper tourists, but the higher spending tourists? I'm just going to give you, I can't see that. How many minutes? Okay, I'll give you just a little bit.
Some places in the world are special. Have you ever heard about the Lanzarote effect? Legend says that if you wake up the volcano El Cuervo, strange phenomena will happen. And people say you will be transported to another universe.
And you can watch the rest of that in your own time. It's on YouTube. It's called the Lanzarote Experience. If we can cut. Thank you. Okay, the last one, I'm going to speed it up, about a minute and a half, if that's okay. So Oregon, I wanted to bring it home at the end. Hotels wanted to show their commitment to sustainability. They wanted to give travelers an opportunity to give back, which was something that we started our evening with tonight, this idea about giving back. So we established a philanthropy program where you can make a donation when you leave the hotel. $36,000 went to community projects in Oregon last year as a result. So I know you guys are probably all about takeaways. What was the takeaway here? So I'm going to help you out a little bit. So I want you to remember the juxtaposition between this largest industry in the world that's so much fun and has the opportunity for so much growth and so many good things, but also is one of the largest environmentally damaging industries in the world. So, and that sense of urgency and that sense of responsibility that James talked about, I want you to think about that. Our job in all this is to share knowledge. I would like you to share knowledge as well. Share knowledge of the problem. We've decision makers. We do what we can to generate those solutions that are going to enrich lives and protect the community. Because it's all really about outcomes. It's about what we leave behind at the end of the day. So really think it's time to stop thinking about sustainable tourism as an eco-lodge and stop thinking about it as a green option and start thinking about it as a better option, not only for business, but for our future, our climate, and really something that's better for everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Louise. Our next guest speaker is Anna Clark. She's with the Rainforest Alliance. She's a communications associate and a media outreach specialist. And if you haven't had a chance to check on the Rainforest Alliance, please do it. It is an amazing small nonprofit organization doing all sorts of great projects in sustainability. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now, before I tell you a bit about the Rainforest Alliance and our efforts in sustainable tourism, I'm going to play a quick video for you all.
You are a good person. You spend time with your family. You work out at the gym.
Come on, push.
You conserve water while showering. You like nice clothes. You give to charity. You recycle. You drive a Prius, but you use your bike when you can. You enjoy the occasional distraction at work, and you always send a card on Mother's Day. Always. But there's a part of you that tells yourself that you're not so good, that you could be doing more, that the world is falling apart at the seams, and all you've been doing is yoga. One day, you see that the rainforest is being destroyed at a staggering rate of 32 million acres a year. That's the equivalent of one football field every 78 seconds. You feel bad, angry, guilty. You've been apathetic for too long. You want to do something about it. You must do something about it. Well, this is what you're not going to do.
I quit!
You're not going to quit your job, leave your family, get on the next flight to Nicaragua, take a bus to the edge of the jungle, then hoof it across rivers, lakes, and streams on a quest to the very heart of the rainforest.
Take me to the heart of the rainforest.
You're getting closer. You're almost there. You have arrived.
You're not going to ingratiate yourself with the local tribesmen, go to great lengths to earn their respect and trust.
No.
It is around now you realize you're living out the cliché gringo fantasy of becoming an honorary native and leading the resistant forces. But screw it. If they could do it, so can you.
I'm gonna save you!
This guy comes over here, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna pull a zafting bats right through him, right over here.
You're not going to coordinate and occupy the rainforest movement, realize it's hopeless, summon the power of the gods, lead a revolution against the deforesters and their multinational employers in an apocalyptic, once-and-for-all battle to save humanity, only to awaken 2 days later in an El Salvadorian hospital with 2 toes missing on your left foot.
Siri, I want to go home.
Hobble out of Central America, up through Mexico, across the Sierra Madre where you break down, have your first cigarette in 4 years, accidentally start a wildfire, killing off the endangered species that once served as your occupational distraction, finally make it back home, only to find you've been replaced at work by a guy named TJ, and that things at home are not what they used to be. You're not going to do any of these things, but what you can do is follow the frog. Buying Rainforest Alliance certified products ensures the future of our rainforests, so that you don't have to do the things you shouldn't do anyway. Just follow the frog.
So the Rainforest Alliance is a global nonprofit organization, and we work to conserve biodiversity and ensure sustainable livelihoods by transforming land use practices, business practices, and also consumer behavior. And to accomplish our mission, we focus our efforts in 4 key areas: in sustainable agriculture, sustainable forestry, sustainable tourism, and also in combating global climate change. So some of you may be familiar with our green frog seal. This is awarded to farms and to forests that meet a holistic set of standards that both protect the environment and also improve the rights and well-being of workers, their families, and their communities. And worldwide, we've certified over 190 million acres of land that are now being managed responsibly on farms and on forests. We also work to address global climate change by providing farmers and foresters and tourism business managers with tools to help them cut their emissions, increase their ability to store carbon, and also adapt to changes in the local climate, such as increasing frequency of droughts or floods. So as we've heard from the previous speakers, tourism can have a huge impact on both livelihoods and biodiversity. It has the potential to both protect or destroy. So we know that tourism is one of the most important sources of income for many people, especially in developing countries. Over the past few decades, we've seen over a 100% increase to tourism to biodiversity hotspots such as Brazil and Ecuador. And we're finding that the key draw for the tourists are nature, so people going to see the rainforest or the wildlife, as well as the cultural experiences. So these images here reflect the model of tourism that we're really trying to avoid. We're seeing animals being kept in cages for human entertainment. We're seeing garbage. We're seeing polluted marine ecosystems. And it was really in response to images such as these that the Rainforest Alliance launched its sustainable tourism program. Now, we developed our sustainable tourism business program with 2 key goals in mind. First of all, we want to work with businesses like hotels, and we want to help them adopt sustainable practices that are both protecting the environment and also supporting the local community. Secondly, we want to build consumer demand for sustainable tourism by educating people about the responsible choices that are available. But ultimately, we're working to promote local development and improve the livelihoods of communities, and we're also working to protect wildlife and conserve fragile ecosystems. So to help businesses like hotels adopt more sustainable practices, we've developed a variety of tools that guide them step by step on the path to sustainability. And these tools help prepare hotels and tour guides and tour operators so that they can go on and achieve verification. And that verification evaluates the sustainability of a hotel or business. So what exactly that hotel is doing to promote the economy and promote the well-being of the community and protect the environment. So to date, we've provided more than 9,000 tourism entrepreneurs with training and technical assistance to both understand and adopt sustainable practices. And as a result of our efforts, over 700 tourism businesses have gone on and achieved verification. So these businesses can use our verified mark, or our little green frog, as a way to distinguish themselves in the marketplace. So then consumers, like you guys, can look for the frog and know that these businesses are ones that have taken concrete steps to protect the environment, to protect wildlife, and also to support the local community. So one way that we help consumers identify and find businesses that are doing the right thing is through our website, sustainabletrip.org. And Sustainable Trip is a listing of responsible businesses, businesses that are protecting the environment and are supporting the local community. And all of the businesses featured have either been verified by the Rainforest Alliance, certified by a third party, or recommended by a reputable organization. So if you go on Sustainable Trip, you'll notice that each profile for each business, like this hotel, it includes a description of the hotel, it includes a listing of the activities and amenities, so if it offers surfing or hiking or rainforest walks, but it also includes a blurb about the sustainability initiatives of the hotel or business. So again, what that business is doing specifically to promote the economy or support the local community or protect the environment. And examples of this could include conserving energy or conserving water. It could include recycling or treating waste. It could include hiring employees from the local community, or even sourcing goods for the restaurants and for the gift stores from the local community as well. And these are just a few of the examples. So to evaluate the impact of our efforts in conserving water and conserving energy, we conducted a study back in 2011 that looked at 14 different verified hotels located in Latin America. And this study found that 71% of the hotels reduced their water consumption and 31% reduced their water savings bill, creating an average annual savings of over $2,700 per year per business. A further 44% of the hotels invested in control systems, such as repairing leaks or installing water-saving devices. This same study found that 93% of the hotels reduced their energy consumption, creating an average annual savings of over $5,200. And if you combine this with the amount of money they were saving from the water, that amounts to almost $8,000 per year. And for one single business like a hotel located in a developing country, this is a pretty significant amount of money. So of the hotels, we also saw that 83% invested in improving the efficiency of their electrical systems, and another 50% implemented other measurements such as solar heating and natural cooling systems. In a more recent case study, we looked at the impact of 5 verified hotels located in one community in Nicaragua. And this study really highlighted how sustainable tourism can have a positive impact on the local economy and also on the livelihoods of the local community. These 5 businesses collectively provided 116 jobs in the community, as well as 232 indirect jobs. These businesses provided $90,000 in salary payments over a 4-month period, and the wages provided were on average 40% higher than that of other industries in the area. 96% of all the hotel's employees were local and 41% were women, and collectively these 5 hotels were supporting 588 people in the local community located in 111 different households. So again, this really just reflects how sustainable tourism can have a positive impact on the economy and also on the livelihood and on the local people as well. So that's about it. In conclusion, I want to say I know many of you may be thinking about your upcoming spring break. So if you are, I really encourage you to make a responsible choice. And if you want to try and identify destinations and hotels that are sustainable, you can check out our website, sustainabletrip.org.
Okay, this is very special for me. I get to introduce Eric Ricaurte. Come on up. Eric is the founder and the CEO of a business called Greenview. Eric is truly an entrepreneur, and he's a consultant who works in hotel measurement, and he also works with a lot of tourism organizations. And those things are all really important, but what's really important is that Eric graduated from the Tisch Center with his master's degree 3 years ago. He served as Dean Hansen's graduate assistant, and I had the pleasure of having him in 3 classes. And so look what happened. Here he is. Welcome, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be back. Quick show of hands again. Please raise your hand if you plan on living in a big city and working for a fairly big company, or either one of those. Yeah, pretty easy in New York City, right? This is who I'm talking to, and this is what I'm talking about. Sustainable tourism for the masses. Very interesting conversation we heard earlier from the panel. And when I was back in Quadri's class, in some of the reading, we found out that in the early 70s, when environmentalism was growing, at the same time, we were starting to get psychographic studies on tourists. And so you had Cohen's work on the organized mass tourist, individual mass tourist, the explorer, the drifter. You had Plog's work on why destinations rise and fail, with the allocentric on one end, the person who goes to that destination like Costas, and then you got the psychocentric on the other side, the moon party people. You look at Butler's tourism area life cycle, where it documents how destinations exactly go through that phase over and over and over again. And you start to see this kind of thing is common, it's recurring. And so it's been in existence for years. And at the same time, those who were in the sustainable tourism field 20, 30 years ago were also those allocentrics, the explorers, the first arrivers, and the ones who wanted to protect it for those pristine destinations. But the common thread through all that literature is the mass tourist. The majority of the tourists, of travelers, fall in that bigger category. And that's what is the key change that we're seeing today in sustainable tourism, and my main message to you is to think about this from a mainstream way. There's a couple of trends I want to announce, 3 trends to consider there. First, mass tourism and tourism in general is growing. Some slides are presented, but it's growing in emerging markets. You had 50 million travelers to Hong Kong last year from China. Tibet last year. I remember in Prohaska's tourism planning class, we saw a tourism development plan, 1990, that Tibet by 2005 with some good governance, infrastructure, some trails, and targeted marketing to Japanese, Western Europeans, and Americans could reach 500,000 tourists. Tibet had 12.9 million tourists last year, most of them from China. And this is everywhere. I mean, this is not just the Chinese. You have all different emerging markets. I saw a show the other day. You had a Korean reality TV show of Korean actors, K-pop stars, some K-pop backup dancers going to Papua New Guinea and hanging out with the natives. And this is a reality TV show of all different types of people, and they're sitting there, oh, ramen choyo, and other, everybody's interacting with everybody now, so it's much more massive. And so the issue is that we have a couple other pieces. Urbanism. In 2008, marked the first time in the history of the world that more people lived in cities than lived in rural areas. So the masses are growing, the mass travelers are growing, and cities are growing. But the third trend is that sustainability is now mainstream. It's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. Green sustainability, you see it everywhere. Most companies have sustainability programs. Look at this seriously. 56% of Americans now believe that climate change is actually causing the crazy weather that we're looking at. And 63% of global CEOs now will tell you that sustainability issues will fundamentally change the industry in 5 years. And that's all kinds of CEOs. So you have a lot of mainstream issues going. And the issue then is that even though the fragile destinations may work on the ground to put in policy, to put in planning, to make sure they recycle their waste, they're going to go underwater, they're going to be subject to flood, to drought, and they're going to be vulnerable to the impacts that are caused by the majority of the population. And so that's what we do, is we try to work and address the bigger impacts. Now, we help the industry measure and report on sustainability. And the biggest tenet is that you will look at what the big numbers are and say, let's focus on the main impacts. And if you look at what the impacts of travel are, let's call them 3 impacts. It's transportation, the travel to the destination, and then the transportation within the destination. It's the energy and the water consumption from the facilities that you're using, the hotels, the venues, the attractions. and then it's all the waste that's generated. But more importantly is that those impacts are per visitor. So one visitor will have their impact from transportation, from lodging, from activities, and their waste and so forth. And if you multiply that impact by one visitor times a larger number, you start to find where the major impacts are. Example of Huayna Picchu, the top mountain part of Machu Picchu, has a carrying capacity of like 400 people per day. So that's about 150,000 visitors per year, and they've done a good job there to limit the number of visitors. But you get more tourists in one day in Orlando or Vegas or Hong Kong than you do in the entire year to Huayna Picchu. So if you look at the impacts that those tourists have on the planet, then that's where some efforts should be focused. But what we do is we actually try to help look at those numbers and make sense of it and say this is where you should focus your impacts. We work with a lot of events. An event that has 30,000 people in one destination at one time, if you can green that event, then you can make a major impact because that one event in 1 week will generate the same waste as one urban hotel in the entire year. And more importantly, if you can help increase awareness to those 30,000 people in 1 week about how they can be responsible travelers, then you have an opportunity to make real impacts. And so one of the things that we're seeing is that sustainability is mainstream. Cities now are becoming the focus. That's where the major impacts come, and that's where a lot of the innovation is going on at the same time. You're seeing that cities themselves are tourist destinations, and that's the change that we need to think about, is yes, you have the special interest travel to go visit the Eco Lodge, to go visit the indigenous community, to go to that pristine beach, but we need to start thinking about sustainable tourism for mainstream destinations, like New York, like Orlando, like Vegas. Before, we wouldn't have thought that, right? Oh, Orlando is not sustainable. Vegas, no, that's crazy. No, I'm gonna go get my sustainability on the beach somewhere. But now, it's different, because we need to start thinking about the 75 million to the 50 million people that go to Orlando every year, and how we can help change their impacts. And so, that's why if you are gonna be living in a big city, you're gonna be working for a company, start thinking about how your activities on a day-to-day can help build sustainable tourism. So we're seeing a lot of shift, and this is the biggest shift we're gonna see in sustainable tourism in the next few years, is the transition and the focus on large cities, large destinations, and large impacts. And so we're seeing that cities themselves are starting to address this. And again, some of the major tenets, the fact that New York City, you can get here from major markets by train, by bus. You can get from the airport to downtown in public transit. It's a walkable destination. You have things like that, car sharing, bike sharing, these kind of things to help on transportation. You have the potential then in cities to really, really mitigate the major impacts and cut down the carbon footprint, cut down that water consumption, cut down that waste that will then go and impact the other destinations that we want to go visit. And so what I would suggest is that sustainable tourism also, as an attraction for special interest travel, had been one of the tenets for the last 20 years. I'm going to go have that experience. But I would say let's think about it a little differently, because going forward, the way that cities now themselves and destinations in large urban scales are starting to address this will itself become an attraction for you to go visit. I mean, cities look at like Masdar City in Abu Dhabi. Planning a city that is carbon-free and car-free, that's an attraction. Singapore, where I live, the stuff that's going on in Singapore to make it a sustainable destination for its inhabitants is really amazing. And then you have attractions like Gardens by the Bay and ways that you can now live and interact sustainably. So as this goes on, and it's not only abroad, in the US you have a lot of major cities. The mayor's office is working on striving to be the greenest city in America. You look at Portland, Seattle, even Orlando, what Bloomberg was doing in New York. You have major city initiatives to make their cities the most sustainable for inhabitants. But that also goes for all the travelers to those destinations, like the millions of tourists who come to New York every year. And so we're going to see a lot more focus on cities themselves. That's really the thinking, is we need to change our thinking about sustainability as being something niche to thinking about in our day-to-day. And it's really assumed because this change of thinking is, I think, the heart of what sustainable development is and sustainability is. I really think it's a thought revolution. It's a revolution in the way we think. And I think it's very similar, I'd like to think about the scientific revolution back 500 years ago, which was another major way that people started changing the way they thought. Now, we had the concept of heliocentrism. Back in 1500s was a theory. This is a theory that the Earth revolved around the sun. And that was revolutionary. Before, we used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe. And then Copernicus and his colleagues come along and said, I think it's more complex than that. And so in 1543, they came up with this idea. And then it started gaining traction. And all of the innovation, creativity, thought, what we know today about astronomy, chemistry, physics, engineering, modern science, all spawned from that one idea. Now, it was, on one hand, the external, but also the internal. In the same year, you had studies saying that human anatomy is a little bit different. There's actually a skeletal system, that blood doesn't come from the liver. Blood's actually a part of the that actually circulates in the system. So you have an intrinsic look, and you have a look to the stars to think about the way we exist here. And sustainability is kind of the same, because it's a matter now of us thinking about how we live on a finite planet with finite resources, and how we have the ability to measure everything that we're doing in activity, that everything has a carbon footprint, every activity, and that carbon footprint is our contribution and our participation and our limit on this planet. And so, in conclusion, I encourage you to think about this. We had 200 years, it took 200 years for the idea of heliocentrism to become mainstream. Now you really can't be a human being in society without thinking the Earth revolves around the sun. But sustainability, we don't have 200 years to change. We have about 20. And so this major shift needs to go on thinking. And I would say then, to you as students, think about in your jobs, in your lifestyles, in your activities here, how you can be more sustainable and help contribute to a destination, a big city, becoming known as a sustainable tourism destination. Thank you.